Namaste everyone. So today we are going to speak about extremely interesting and I believe very important question that is about Jesus in India, in Himalayas. And as you know, actually when we take classical Christian Bible, New Testament, we have actually information about what Jesus did and where he was till the age of teenager, and then huge gap, and then he reappear in the age of something like 30 or 29. And the question is for many Christians, and by the way non-Christians as well, what Jesus did, where he was in that so-called missing approximately 15 or 17 years. Actually, it's very difficult to say personally for me why gospel writers did not mention anything about these years. Actually, it's very strange, because if we have Jesus the Christ, who is the great spiritual master, messenger from the Lord, and it's extremely important actually to know all details about his life, because if we know more about his life, it means we can understand much better actually his message. And honestly speaking, if we suppose that his earthly life, it's 33 years, and most of that years remains outside of the gospel information, and that's the reason why people asking questions. Actually, I wish to create a number of videos about Jesus in India, and I want to make my own investigation and share with the information which I have, and offer to you different pieces of information, and just let you think as well about the question, because honestly speaking, nobody, including myself, may say for sure about that so-called missing years, but at least we have a chance to put a lot of questions and analyze at least some pieces of information which we anyway have. And actually that's the reason why I'm planning to make a number of videos about this question, and all of them will have like a title, Jesus the Christ in India, and then number 1, number 2, number 3, and this video is a number 1 actually, because I have so many things to tell that in one video it's going to be just impossible. Well, let us come back to the very beginning of this story and history, and ask the question, actually, who was the first person who proclaimed the possibility for Jesus to spend 15 or 17 years in India? And actually it was one Russian journalist, and his name was Nicholas Natovich, and he lived in the end of 19th century, and actually he passed away beginning of 20th century. Well, I think that in this video I wish to concentrate on the personality of this Nicholas Natovich, because, if the beginning of this huge investigation, the global investigation about Jesus in India, actually started with this guy. Let us discuss this guy itself, because it's very important to know about the personality the inner life of the person who was the first who told publicly that, yeah, okay, Jesus actually spent half of his life in India. Well, Nicholas Natovich was born in the middle of 19th century, and he was basically Jewish. He was born in a Jewish family, and he became a very successful journalist. And later on he decided he chose to become Orthodox Christian. Not just Christian, but Orthodox Christian, because he was a citizen of Russian Empire, actually Russia. And well, I am asking myself why Nicholas Natovich chose to become Christian. And I have two reasons. That's my opinion again, just personal opinion. I think that it was two reasons why he chose to become Christian. Okay, the first reason, I really believe that Nicholas Natovich was interested in Christianity, in Jesus the Christ and his spiritual and divine message. When I was learning Nicholas Natovich's life, I actually came across many facts, and it was okay, maybe just a kind of intuition, but anyway, I believe that he was genuine in his interest in Jesus' teaching. But the second reason why he chose to become Christian actually obviously was a social one. In Russia at that time, 19th century, beginning of 20th century, ethnic question was not so important. But important was religious question. For example, if you are ethnic Russian or ethnic Armenian or ethnic Jewish or ethnically any other nationality, because actually even at that time Russian Empire was the multi-ethnic country, something like 150 ethnic groups were in Russia at that time, and now we have basically the same number. But here in Russia, actually we understand when we say that somebody is a Russian, we understand at least 2 or 3 meanings, and one of them just Russian citizen. The second is the Russian-speaking person, and third is ethnically Russian. So actually, in 19th century in Russian Empire, your ethnic group was not at all important, but your religion was the key for your social success. So, if the person was Orthodox Christian, then it's like all possibilities to grow socially, to occupy any position in a society. But if somebody was not Orthodox Christian, then so it was a really factor which could create actually a lot of limitations for the Muslims, for the Jewish people, and for the Buddhists. Actually, in Russia, Buddhism is also traditional religion. Maybe you know it, maybe not. But anyway, that's the reason why sometimes people who were born in a non-Christian families, they choose to become Orthodox Christians just to get a better chance for the career, for the business, for the social life. And actually, I think it is quite obvious that Nicholas Natovich, who was born as the Jewish, and he was a very talented journalist. For him it was like an extra chance to come to Petersburg, to Moscow, to all that capitals, and get a better job in different newspapers and magazines. and for that he must be Orthodox Christian. That was at that time, of course. Now that's not the point. Well, why I'm paying attention to the religious life of Nicholas Natovich? Because that's actually important. Because, Jewish-born journalist, very important journalist of that time. Okay, why this Jewish-born journalist started to inquire about Jesus the Christ? And the reason was because actually he became himself Christian, and let me repeat again, according to my personal opinion, two reasons. One of them, real, genuine interest in the Christian philosophy and a teaching and a message, and the second is social. And let us be honest that, of course, that was also important for the many non-Christian people who were citizens of Russia at that time in 19th century. Okay, Nicholas Natovich went to India. It was 1887. And he went to India, then he went to Kashmir, then Ladakh, so all that northwest part of Himalayan region. And his goal was to visit a very big Buddhist monastery, which is Himis. And that monastery is some distance from Leh, which is capital of Ladakh. Anyway, that even at that time it was quite sensitive, politically speaking, area. And actually, unfortunately, even now this is also politically sensitive area, as you must probably know. Guys, I have a lot of questions about Nicholas Natovich and his journey to his kind of scientific pilgrimage to India, 1887. And it's strange for me that not so many people actually ask these crucial questions. Okay, let me start with the first one. How it's possible that this wonderful man, very important journalist, talented journalist, how it's happened that this absolutely unbelievable and a kind of crazy idea that Jesus Christ spent something like 15 or 17 years in Indian Himalayas, just how this idea appeared in his mind. This is the first question. For us, people in the beginning of 21st century, and even in the second half of 20th century, so it's absolutely okay to discuss possibility that Jesus Christ spent years and years in different parts of India. That's okay for the 21st century and for the end of 20th century as well. But it was not okay, and it was not natural to discuss this absolutely outstanding idea in the end of 19th century. And let me repeat my mysterious question. Who told to Nicholas Natovich about this possibility? From where he got this actually crazy idea? And that's the huge question. Okay, one more really important question is how it's possible that he came to know about possibility that manuscript, that this holy book with the story of Jesus in India, so it is possible to find out this book exactly in a Himis monastery somewhere behind Leh, behind Kashmir. How it's possible that this journalist came to know that, okay, I have to go to India and I have to go exactly, like Kashmir, well, Ladakh, Leh, and then to the Hemis monastery. Okay, who told him to go exactly to this monastery? I mean to say, it's a question. Okay, I have some possibilities from which sources actually Nicholas Natovich could get this idea, and the main possibility is a Theosophical Society established by Madame Blavatsky. Because actually this kind of ideas, yeah, we may actually suppose that this kind of ideas was possible to get exactly from this source, which is the Theosophical Society. Because Madame Blavatsky, and actually I have a couple of videos about Madame Blavatsky, her mission and life and spiritual message, so you can see these videos as well. But in internet and on my channel, yeah. But you know, Madame Blavatsky, actually her mission was to build this spiritual, intellectual bridge between East and West, and she introduced a lot of spiritual teachings for the Western spiritual seekers and esoteric groups. And the second half of 19th century and first half of 20th century, the most influential esoteric group was exactly Theosophical Society. For 100 years, second half of 19th century and first half of 20th century, the most influential group, of course, it was Theosophical Society, and each and every spiritual seeker or practitioner of any kind of meditation was under influence, and sometimes even was a member, but at least under influence of Theosophical Society. Of course, now in the 21st century, nobody is interested in Theosophical Society, but of course, the books and the philosophy of Madame Blavatsky, it's like eternal, and even now it's very important to learn. I believe Madame Blavatsky philosophy and her message is really actual, it's like eternal, but the Theosophical Society as the institution, of course, completely unimportant today, but at that time it was greatest source of knowledge and information. Well, for the Westerners, for the Europeans and Americans, of course, will sound strange, but in the end of 19th century, even in the beginning of 20th century, Theosophical Society was strictly prohibited in Russia because of Russian Orthodox Church. And Russian Orthodox Church, they considered at that time and even now that Theosophical Society is something like black magic. But at that time, in the 19th century, Russian Church could force government and make it unlegal, and of course now Theosophical Society in the small groups, they exist in Russia, but it's not influential anymore. But Theosophical Society actually exists in Russia absolutely openly. But end of 19th century, it was prohibited and punishable to read books, any kind of publications of Theosophical Society, and membership was also very dangerous. It was like that. And anyway, quite number of Russian esoteric people, intellectuals, of course, they could keep, books of pre-published by Theosophical Society, even secretly. And I believe that Nicholas Natovich could meet people from Theosophical Society and actually received from them this basic information about possibility that Jesus spent years and years in India, and more important, that I believe that exactly from Theosophical Society it was possible to get even that exact idea, which is very important, that Himis monastery behind Ladakh in the mountains is the place where it is necessary to try to find this information. Well, another question which is really very interesting and a not easy one, how it's possible that, well, basically not so rich journalists from Russia could go to India for a long time, and the question is about all the documents, all the papers and financial support. India at that time was part of British Empire, and actually this area of northwest Himalayas, actually Kashmir and the neighboring Tibet and the neighboring Afghanistan, that was, even at that time, 19th century, a politically sensitive area, and it was like a stage for the political struggle between British and Russian governments. And because Russian Empire also was very influential in that area at that time, and even now as well, North China, Tibet, Afghanistan, etc. So it means for the Russian citizens, for the Russian journalists, it was not only for financially too expensive to go to such a trip, but politically very difficult, because British intelligence service and police immediately could suspect the guy that he is actually spying. But anyway, it's strange that Nicholas Natovich anyway went there and pretty much successfully went there. Again, it's a very interesting question that Russian intelligence, it's a very big question, and even in 12th century, let me repeat, even in 12th and 13th century, Russian intelligence was very powerful one. It means 8 centuries back. In all times, Russian intelligence was and is very powerful. That's part of political culture in Russia, and in a sense it's good, in a sense it's maybe not really good, but that's the part of Russian reality. And we have a lot of stories about very clever and powerful actions of Russian intelligence, like century and 3 centuries and 5 centuries and then 8 centuries back. And it's interesting that many Russian esoteric gurus who went to the North India, Himalayas and Tibet in the end of 19th century and beginning of 20th century actually received that financial support from Russian government, and to be exact from the intelligence service. And it means, for example, we have indirect proves that Madame Blavatsky was also somehow connected with Russian intelligence. And of course we don't have real proof, but anyway, British government even in that time always suspected Madame Blavatsky that she is actually spying, and I think that the possibility is there that her trip to India and foundation of Philosophical Society in London and in Adyar, South India, was under, like support, of course, from some rich British and American disciples, but who knows, maybe Russian government also supported this idea because of all that spy games. Okay, later on, when George Gurdjieff went to Tibet, really successfully, by the way, he was the most successful guy who spent really years and years in Tibet, and he was successful because of many reasons, because his face was very much Oriental, because his father was Greek and mother Armenian, because he knew many Oriental languages, and because, as I told you, and maybe you know it pretty well, that Tibetan Buddhism actually is a traditional religion for Russia as well. And in Russia we have three traditional religious communities. It's like Orthodox Christianity, Sunni Islamic communities, and very small but at the same time Tibetan Buddhist communities as well. And Gurdjieff, he actually went to Tibet together with Russian lamas, and that's the reason why he was able to penetrate Tibet easily. And also we have indirect information about possibility that all that long trips, long pilgrimages by Gurdjieff in Afghanistan and Tibet and North India was not without government support. Actually, it was with the government support, and Russian intelligence was using even Gurdjieff to collect some information, etc., about politically sensitive area of Afghanistan, Tibet, and North India at that time. Why I'm giving you all this kind of information for you? Let me mention also Nicholas Roerich, who was also traveling to that area in 1920s, and in the case of Roerich we have not just indirect but quite direct information about Russian intelligence, who the guys were using Nicholas Roerich and his expedition for their own purposes as well. So, I mean, that's part of political tradition and a culture in Russia. What can I do? And that's, creating a possibility that Nicholas Natovich went to this area also as the giant job for the, it was also kind of job for the Russian intelligence service, and that's the reason why he got financial support to go there, and financial support from unknown source, and I suppose that could be Russian intelligence, and also he got all the papers necessary for that very uneasy journey. Well, let me complete my video for today, because I don't wish to make it so long, and as I told you in the very beginning, that it's going to be number of videos about Jesus in India. And actually I wish to to investigate this question with all details, and in this first video we just started. It's not the end actually, guys, but we just started to analyze the personality of this very interesting person, Nicholas Natovich, who in the end of 19th century, it was 1887, went to India. And the purpose of his journey was to find out materials, information about Jesus in India. And I think it's very important to analyze the personality of Nicholas Natovich, because he was the first guy, and we have to know about him as much as possible to understand, to well, to you know, to be clear about was it real, all his information, or maybe fake. So that reason why we have to know more about Nikola Stantovich himself. And next videos you can find easily, like Jesus the Christ in India, part 1, part 2, etc. on my channel here in YouTube. So that's how you can find the next parts. Okay, God bless you, see you next time.